What if the message that ends a relationship is not really about ending it at all? What if goodbye is sometimes the most desperate word a person can send when they are terrified of what happens if they stay? And what if, behind one devastating decision, there are two people who have spent far too long pretending that they can control feelings that have already changed everything? That is where this story begins. Not with a red carpet. Not with cameras. Not with the polished Hollywood image that the public is accustomed to seeing. It begins in the quietest part of the night, when there is nobody left to impress and nowhere left to hide. A phone lies face up in a dark room. The screen lights up. A message has been written, erased, rewritten, and stared at for what feels like an eternity. The words are painfully simple. We need to end this. There is nothing dramatic about the sentence itself. No accusation. No confession. No explanation. Just a handful of words carrying the weight of everything that came before them. And that is precisely what makes them frightening. Because sometimes the shortest messages contain the longest stories. For Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan, the public has spent years fascinated by the chemistry associated with their work together. Their connection on screen became one of the most discussed aspects of the 50 Shades phenomenon, and audiences naturally became curious about the people behind those characters. But curiosity has a dangerous habit in Hollywood. It can turn a performance into a rumor, a friendship into speculation, and an on-screen connection into an imagined private life. So this story should be understood as a dramatic, fictionalized interpretation rather than a claim about their real private relationship. Within that imagined story, however, one question becomes impossible to ignore. What happens when two people realize that the story everyone else thinks they understand is completely different from the story they are living themselves? That is where the real tension begins. Because the problem was never simply whether there were feelings. The problem was what those feelings would cost. Dakota sat alone, staring at the phone. The room was silent, but her thoughts were anything but. She had spent hours convincing herself that she was making the sensible decision. She had listed every reason it needed to stop. She had told herself that distance would eventually make things easier. She had imagined waking up months later and being grateful that she had been strong enough to walk away. But every time she reached the end of that argument, the same question returned. If this was really the right decision, why did it hurt so much? Her thumb hovered over the screen. For a moment, she nearly switched the phone off. Then she thought about everything that had happened. The conversations that lasted longer than they should have. The silences that said more than words. The moments when neither person needed to explain what they were thinking because the other somehow already knew. Those moments had become dangerous. Not because they were necessarily wrong, but because they had started to feel more real than either person was prepared to admit. And that created a problem that affection alone could not solve. There was a life outside those moments. There were careers, families, responsibilities, reputations, existing commitments, and perhaps most importantly, there was the relentless machinery of public attention. Hollywood does not allow private emotions to remain private for very long. A glance can become a headline. A conversation can become a rumor. A photograph can become an entire fictional narrative. And when two people already have a history that audiences are emotionally invested in, even the smallest interaction can become fuel. Dakota knew that. She also knew something more frightening. She knew herself. She knew that if she allowed herself one more conversation, one more explanation, one more opportunity to hear his voice, the walls she had built around her decision might collapse. So she did the thing people often do when they are desperate to appear strong. She made the decision before she was emotionally ready to make it. The message remained on the screen. She read it again, then again. Her eyes became fixed on the final sentence. There are moments in life when a person understands that pressing send will create a before and an after. This was one of those moments. She pressed the button and immediately regretted it. Not because she suddenly changed her mind, because she realized that the decision was now real. Before the message, she could still imagine changing her mind. After the message, she had created consequences. Across the city, Jamie was awake. He had barely slept. His mind kept returning to the same sequence of memories, replaying conversations and trying to find the precise moment when Eve. Everything had become too complicated. That is the cruelest part of emotional conflict. The human mind desperately searches for a single cause. One mistake, one sentence, one moment. Something that can be blamed, something that can be repaired. But complicated relationships rarely collapse because of one event. They erode under pressure. 1,000 small decisions create one enormous consequence. Jamie looked at his phone. The notification appeared. He opened it. Then he stopped moving. For several seconds, he simply stared. He read the message once, then twice. The words did not change. His first instinct was disbelief. Not anger, not even sadness. Disbelief. Because there is a particular kind of shock that arrives when someone tells you something you have secretly feared but never truly believed they would do. His hand tightened around the phone. He could have responded immediately. Instead, he placed it down. He stood up, walked across the room, then returned, picked up the phone again. There are no instructions for moments like this. Nobody teaches you what to do when someone you care about decides that distance is safer than love. There is no correct sentence, no perfect response, no guarantee that saying the right thing will change anything. Eventually, Jamie typed, "Can we talk?" He stared at it, deleted it, typed again. "Please don't make this decision through a message." Deleted that too. Then he finally sent something simple. "Please talk to me." The message disappeared into the conversation. And suddenly he was waiting. Waiting is often worse than rejection. Because rejection is an answer. Silence is a question. Minutes passed. Nothing. He checked the phone again. Nothing. He placed it on the table. Picked it up. Nothing. The room seemed to become smaller. And that is when the emotional power dynamic shifted. Until that moment, Dakota had felt powerless because she believed she could not control her feelings. Now she had something she could control. Distance. Jamie, meanwhile, had lost the ability to reach her. The person who wanted the conversation now had to wait for permission to have it. That difference mattered. Because relationships are not only built on affection, they are also built on access. Who can call? Who can walk away? Who gets to decide when the conversation ends? Who is left waiting? And in moments of emotional crisis, those questions can become more important than the feelings themselves. Dakota saw the notification. She did not open it. She knew who it was from. She knew what it would say. And she knew that reading it would make everything harder. So she put the phone down, then picked it up again, then put it down once more. This was no longer about whether she cared. That question had already been answered. She cared too much. That was the problem. If she had felt nothing, leaving would have been easy. If there had been anger, betrayal, or indifference, perhaps the ending would have been cleaner. But affection creates ambiguity. And ambiguity is where people become trapped. Dakota walked to the window. The city outside continued as though nothing had happened. Cars moved along the streets. Lights remained on in distant buildings. Somewhere, people were laughing. Somewhere else, someone was waking up for work. The world had not stopped. Only hers had. And that contrast made the moment feel even more surreal. She had spent so long imagining that ending something would bring peace. Instead, she discovered something nobody tells you. Sometimes ending something creates a different kind of chaos. The chaos of absence. The chaos of unanswered questions. The chaos of wondering whether the pain you feel now is temporary or whether you have just destroyed something you will spend years trying to understand. She sat down. Her phone remained beside her. Another notification appeared. She did not touch it. Then another. Still nothing. She whispered to herself that this was necessary. She repeated it. Necessary. 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 But the more she said it, the less convinced she sounded. And that is where the story takes a darker turn. Because when someone repeatedly tells themselves that a decision is necessary, it can sometimes mean they are trying to convince themselves rather than anyone else. The decision may be logical. The heart may simply refuse to cooperate. Across the city, Jamie eventually stopped sending messages. Not because he had stopped caring, Because he realized that every additional message could make him look desperate. And desperation changes the balance of a conversation. He knew that. So he put the phone down. For the first time that night, he tried to accept the possibility that this might actually be over. But acceptance did not arrive. Instead, another thought appeared. What if she isn't leaving because she doesn't care? What if she is ill? Leaving because she doesn't care? What if she is leaving because she cares too much? That question changed everything. Because if the problem was indifference, there was nothing to fight for. But if the problem was fear, then the situation was completely different. Fear can make people run from exactly what they want. Fear can turn affection into distance. Fear can make a person destroy something before someone else has the opportunity to destroy it first. And fear was becoming the invisible third character in this story. Nobody could see it. Nobody could photograph it. Nobody could report on it. But it was influencing every decision. Dakota's fear was not simply about losing control. It was about consequences. She knew that intense emotions could make people behave differently from the people they believed themselves to be. She knew that once boundaries blurred, rebuilding them could become almost impossible. And she feared becoming trapped inside a situation that had no clean ending. Jamie had a different fear. His was the fear of regret. He could survive heartbreak. Perhaps. What he did not know if he could survive was wondering whether he had walked away too easily. That distinction matters. Heartbreak says, it ended. Regret says, maybe it didn't have to. And regret is far more difficult to escape. By morning, neither of them had found an answer. Dakota eventually decided to seek advice from someone whose opinion carried a different kind of authority. Her mother. The fictionalized version of this story takes her to Melanie Griffith, not because a parent can magically solve an adult emotional crisis, but because sometimes the person who knows you longest is the one who can recognize the difference between a decision and an escape. Dakota arrived exhausted. She did not need to explain everything. Her face said enough. Her mother looked at her and immediately knew that something was wrong. There was no dramatic interrogation, no demand for details, just a quiet question. Is this about him? Dakota said nothing, and that silence answered it. She sat down. For a while, neither woman spoke. Then Dakota finally admitted what she had been refusing to say out loud. I don't know whether I'm leaving because it's wrong or because I'm frightened. Her mother did not rush to answer. That was important, because sometimes advice becomes dangerous when it arrives too quickly. Instead, she asked another question. If you remove everyone else from the picture, what do you want? Dakota looked down. That was the question she had been avoiding. Because it was easier to ask what was responsible. Easier to ask what was acceptable. Easier to ask what would cause the least damage. But what did she actually want? She could not answer. And perhaps that was the most honest answer she had given all night. Meanwhile, Jamie was beginning to understand something equally painful. He could not force a person to stay. No matter how powerful his feelings were. No matter how many memories they shared. No matter how convincing his argument might be. Love does not create ownership. That is where many stories like this become misunderstood. People often romanticize persistence. They imagine that refusing to give up is proof of devotion. But there is a line between fighting for a relationship and refusing to respect someone's decision. Jamie stood on the wrong side of that line for a moment. Then he stepped back. He did not go to her door. He did not create a scene. He did not demand an explanation. He simply waited. And waiting forced him to confront something he had avoided. Perhaps the relationship had never been entirely in his control. Perhaps it had always depended on two people choosing each other at the same time. And now only one of them was choosing. That realization hurt more than the message. Because it meant there was no grand gesture capable of fixing the problem. No speech. No dramatic reunion. No perfect confession.